What's happening? Happy Monday to everybody watching and listening. It is very much appreciated. WrestleMania was epic last night. Beers were cold. Chinese food was great. And I am ready to roll on this Monday. If you missed Kyle Duggar Breaking News Podcast, it's on the channel. We did it yesterday afternoon. Hit you with about 35 minutes on Kyle Duggar. You can check it out at the channel. Always appreciate you. All right, so last Friday, Drake May made his visit to Gillette Stadium. Thursday night, he had dinner, reportedly at Davio's. And then Friday, he had his visit. Tonight, Jayden Daniels will have dinner with the Patriots brass. And then tomorrow, he will go through his official top 30 visit at Gillette Stadium. Here's my number one question for Jayden Daniels when he walks through the door. Are you willing? Are you capable? Do you have the desire of taking care of yourself? And that might sound very strange, but that's my top question with Daniels. Is he willing to learn, to slide, to get down, to get out of bounds? Is he willing to take care of himself? Because at LSU, he didn't show much desire to do that at all. And the last thing I want to do is invest the third pick in this draft on somebody who's going to be running around like Wile E. Coyote, getting ready to get smoked by an NFL linebacker or hybrid safety. So that's the top question I have for Daniels. He walks through the door. Are you ready to take care of yourself? Do you truly get it? Are you going to slide, get out of bounds? Now, I've done some more prep and some more research as we get closer to the draft on all of these quarterbacks. I've read some more stuff on Drake May. I've read more things on Daniels. And I do have some concerns about the fit with Daniels. So let's go through those first. Pressure to sack rate. Now, this is one of those statistics, analytics that some people are catching up to right now. But pressure to sack rate has been pretty indicative of how successful a quarterback is going to be going from the collegiate days to the NFL. Zachary Kruger of NBC Sports wrote about pressure to sack rate recently. A pass rush play where the rusher affects the quarterback before the pass is thrown. A pass rush becomes a pressure when pressure probability exceeds 75%. This includes sacks, quarterback hits, quarterback hurries, and other plays where the pass rusher comes into close proximity with the quarterback. It will also include plays where the pass rusher has a free path to the quarterback or is winning the matchup with the blocker. Now, Kruger writes that one common misconception about pressure to sack rate percentage is that quarterbacks who drop back more often will have a worse pressure to sack rate percentage than those who don't. However, last year's leader in dropbacks was Patrick Mahomes. He had an 11.2% pressure to sack rate percentage, which was the second lowest number among qualified quarterbacks with a minimum of 250 dropbacks. So, pressure to sack rate doesn't necessarily mean the more times a guy drops back, the more he's going to face pressure and get sacked. That's not what the numbers show us. Patrick Mahomes drops back a ton for Kansas City because we all know Andy Reid does not necessarily love running the football. Mahomes drops back a ton, but he had the second lowest pressure to sack rate percentage in the NFL last season. So he knows how to get away from sacks. He knows how to protect himself in certain situations. He knows that, I'm going to have a pass rush on this side or that side. He reads the play before the snap. He understands where he is going to come from. So he does a fantastic job, even though he drops back more than anybody in the league, does a fantastic job at evading that pressure and evading sacks. Kruger and others believe that career college pressure to sack percentage numbers are best utilized to find quarterbacks to avoid in the draft. So many people will tell you that break this stuff down. If you look at pressure to sack percentage, that should tell you, in most cases, how that guy is going to perform at the next level. It is very indicative. And guys that have high pressure to sack rate percentages are guys that you mostly want to stay away from in the draft. Kruger writes, while it can help identify plenty of good quarterbacks, the concerning low number of hits at the pro level that comes when we get above a certain pressure to sack percentage threshold for their college career makes for a compelling case for a pressure to sack percentage profile that should be avoided. So here's what Kruger found out. A career college pressure to sack rate, the percentage of 20% or higher, becomes immediately concerning when trying to identify prospects who could successfully make the leap to the NFL. So pressure to sack rate percentage, very indicative of how a quarterback will perform in the NFL. When you get to 20% or higher on that percentage, it usually means the quarterback is not going to be as good at the next level as he was in college. So how does this draft class stack up? Well, before we get into that, I just want to remind you quickly, the Nick Cattle Show is brought to you by Warzone Paintball and Airsoft. Warzone has 9 maps on 30-plus acres of land. We're talking multiple villages, trench warfare map, hilltop forts, paintball, airsoft. They've got kid versions of paintball and airsoft, something for every age group starting at 6+. You just show up with jeans, good shoes, long sleeve shirt. Warzone will handle the rest. Low key, casual. They have rules that are designed to protect new players. Staff, top notch. 4.9 star rating online. Check them out. Warzone Paintball and Airsoft in North Kingston, Rhode Island. Give them a call at 401-228-6366. Beautiful outside today. Weather will start warming up. You want to go have some fun? Check them out at Warzone Paintball and Airsoft. 401-228-6366. Tell them the Nick Cattle Show sent you. All right, back to pressure to sack rate. While you're watching, give us that thumbs up. Means the world to us. Every like to defeat that YouTube algorithm. If you like what we do here, continue to check us out. Continue to like and subscribe, because there are not going to be a ton of shows talking about pressure to sack rate and letting you know how that is indicative of quarterback performance from the collegiate to the NFL level, and how these quarterbacks that will be walking into this draft in just over 2 weeks, what those numbers should tell us about those guys. You go back. Here's an example. The 2022 draft, okay? Football Insights had this post on Twitter. When you look at the pressure to sack rate percentage of those quarterbacks, and you look at what has happened to the 2022 draft, it is another example of how that analytic, how that statistic can help you gain information about whether or not you should bring a guy in. Kenny Pickett, his percentage was 18.6%. As we know, he's been traded. Desmond Ridder, pressure to sack percentage in college was 24.3, traded. Malik Willis, 26%. That's a very high pressure to sack rate percentage. He is now quarterback 3 in Tennessee. Matt Corral, 18.2%. He's in the UFL. Bailey Zappi, you might wonder. He actually had a good pressure to sack rate percentage, just under 17%. And as we know, he's likely going to be quarterback 3 this coming year in New England. Sam Howell was at 26.7%. He's been traded. The best quarterback in the 2022 draft class, Brock Purdy, had a very, very, very low percentage to sack rate. You look at it, 12.9% pressure to sack rate percentage, under 13%. He's the guy that started the Super Bowl for San Francisco. So this isn't always going to be a guarantee, of course, but when you look at pressure to sack rate, Brock Purdy by far had the best percentage in college and ended up being the best quarterback in the class. The Pickett's, the Ridders, the Willises, the Corrals, the Zappies, the Howells, they had higher sack percentages, pressure to sack rates, and they ended up being traded or falling back on the quarterback depth chart. So what's this tell us about Jayden Daniels? Here's one of my concerns about Jayden Daniels, and I think it's at the very top of the list. My number one concern about Daniels is that, A, he scrambles a ton. He loves to scramble. Now, we look at it and say his athleticism is fantastic, so it makes sense that he would love to scramble with the football. But Jayden Daniels scrambled more than 25% of the time last year. And when you watch him play, his instinct, if the first look isn't there, his instinct is to tuck, scramble, run. That's what he thinks in his head. If it's not there, he'll pull it in He'll think about it, then he'll run. So we're talking about a quarterback who loves to scramble, who loves to run. More than 25% of the time he's scrambling around in that pocket. So how was Daniels' pressure to sack rate percentage? It was over 20%. It was at 20.2. That was 78th in the country. So when you combine Daniels' love of running with the football, his natural organic instinct to tuck it and run or tuck it and scramble around when he sees any kind of pressure, to go along with that pressure to sack rate, could lead you to believe that Daniels is going to have a tough time developing into that NFL quarterback that a team taking him in the top 3 wants him to develop into. Now, I will say this about Daniels. His pressure to sack rate improved a ton from 2022. In 2022, his pressure to sack rate, this is ridiculous, was almost 31%. Almost 31%, almost one-third of Jayden Daniels' dropbacks. He's looking at some heat, and we're talking about a very high pressure to sack rate. Again, 20% is pretty much the borderline of, okay, we're creeping into concerning territory. That's where Daniels was this year. He was just slightly above 20%. Last year, he was at almost 31%. And I think one of the questions you have to ask is, how much did his receivers help him with that statistic? It's at least a question that has to be asked. So when you look at that pressure to sack rate number, Daniels was 78th in the country, and he's somebody who loves to run with the football. All right, before we continue, because I have a lot of other thoughts on Jayden Daniels, a couple of other concerns, and I'll tell you whether or not I would draft him at 3 if he was sitting there. But first, give us that thumbs up. The like means everything. More likes means more eyeballs. You've heard the spiel. Let's beat that YouTube algorithm. If you're stopping in every day, make sure you give us that thumbs up. If you're stopping in today for the first time, give us that thumbs up. Stick around for a while. See if you enjoy the content. Also, subscribe. Today is the goal. Today was our goal day, folks, and we're short. We've got to hit 3,000 subscriptions by midnight. We're about 75 away from that. Can we get that number up to 3,000? Can we get to 3,000 subscribers? We're short of it, but we're less than 80 away. Can we make that final push? A huge push. This would be an astronomical push on goal day. Like, subscribe. If you're listening on Spotify, Apple Pods, make sure you subscribe. It would mean the world if we can get to 3,000 subscriptions today before all is said and done. Also, rate, review, Apple Pods, Spotify. That helps. The ratings, the 5 stars, all that stuff, all the comments means a lot to this program. I'm going to try to survive. Trying to survive here, trying to build this audience. You can help us do that. All right. So when you think about Daniels, if you're the Patriots, and you're thinking about his instinct to run, the pressure to sack rate being above 20% this past year, you have a guy who does not love to slide. You have a guy who does not love to get out of bounds. He took a lot of big hits in college, and he's a thinner framed guy. That to me is concerning. When you stack all of those different aspects together, and you think about that result, somebody who's not very big, thin-framed, loves to run with the football, high pressure to sack rate. When you combine those 3 things, that's why my first question for Jayden Daniels when he walks into the room tomorrow is, Jayden, are you willing to protect yourself and take care of yourself, get out of bounds, and get down on the damn ground? About his frame, Chad Graff wrote about this recently. He said, since 2000, only 5 quarterbacks who weighed less than 205 pounds have started 14 games or more in a season. So over the past 23 years, only 5 quarterbacks who weighed less than 205 started 14 games or more. Who were those quarterbacks? Aaron Brooks, Kirk Cousins. By the way, Kirk Cousins much smaller than you think, right? For some reason, I just think Kirk's bigger, but he's like 205, 210. So Aaron Brooks, Kirk Cousins, Doug Flutie, Jeff Garcia, and Bryce Young. Those are your 5 quarterbacks. Those are the 5 quarterbacks since 2000 who have weighed less than 205 and have started 14 games or more in a season. Since 2016, only 3 quarterbacks who weighed 210 pounds or less have started 14 games or more in a season. Those 3 quarterbacks, Kirk Cousins, Bryce Young, and Kyler Murray. So you've got a quarterback prospect in Jayden Daniels whose instinct, his natural instinct, is to run with the football. He doesn't do a very good job of protecting himself when he runs with the football. He also has a pretty high pressure to sack rate percentage. He also is 210 pounds listed. As we've talked about during his pro day, just because you weigh in at 210 at pro day doesn't mean you play at 210. You're not going to play at 210 when you get listed at 210 in late March. You're likely going to play at around what? 205, 200 pounds, somewhere in that area. So he's a thinner guy. And in the last 20 plus years, there haven't been a lot of quarterbacks who have started around Jayden Daniels' weight and played 14 games or more in a season. Now, I would have a couple of follow-up questions for Chad Graff. One of them would be, how many quarterbacks have been this light and drafted into the NFL? How many guys are we talking about, right? And also, how many of those guys were good enough to be considered NFL starters? Context matters. So I'd love those 2 questions answered. Another question that I have about Daniels is, can he play in this weather? Can he play in this weather when the wind is whipping? I'm not worried about snow and rain. He's got like 9 3/8 hands. That's fine. But I'm talking about arm strength. He has adequate arm strength. But does he have enough in the arm to zip it through winds, through gusts? Can he play in certain weather? Grew up in California, started at Arizona State, went to LSU. Can he play consistent football in this weather? Something else, middle of the field throws. Daniels is not very good throwing to the middle of the field. He wasn't asked to do it a lot. So maybe it was just the offense that he was running, or maybe the LSU staff understood that Daniels was uncomfortable throwing in the middle of the field. So inevitably, that's going to be one of those questions as well. Can he throw the football consistently in between the numbers? Can he drive the ball in those intermediate areas in the middle of the field? We talked about Drake May's arm strength and his ability to zip it in the middle of the field. 15, 20, 25 yards down the seam. He can throw BBs. Can Daniels do that consistently? And especially, can he do that when the weather is not necessarily great for him? Legitimate question to ask. My final question about Daniels, and then I'll let you know whether or not I would draft him at 3 if he was sitting there. My final question about Daniels is whether or not he's going to fit this scheme. Mary Kay Cabot was on the podcast Eye on Foxborough from Mass Live, right? Karen Garigian and some others do that pod. And in February, Cabot, who is a Cleveland Browns beat writer, she's done the job for years. She's one of the best in the business. Cabot explained that it wasn't Alex Van Pelt's performance that led to him being let go by Cleveland as much as it was trying to find the perfect fit for Deshaun Watson. Now, here's what Cabot said on that podcast, quote, "They are gearing everything towards Watson this year, and I think they wanted a coordinator that had experience working with dual threat quarterbacks. That's what they like to do. Really, Alex is very steeped in the West Coast scheme. It's not that he's not open-minded or open to new things, but I think they just kind of wanted a dual threat quarterback expert." Mary Kay Cabot in February. Mary Kay Cabot says, Alex Van Pelt out of Cleveland, not because of the job that he did, But Kevin Stefanski, whoever else, we've heard that it was more of an ownership call, but they wanted somebody. They wanted somebody as their OC who could work with dual threat, understood the challenge of that, had experience in doing that. So they went out and they got Ken Dorsey, who was the OC in Buffalo. Josh Allen, obviously, is a guy that can use his legs, can be a dual threat guy. Now, what's funny is when Dorsey left, Joe Brady took over. Joe Brady used the legs more than Dorsey did. But when you look at Mary Kay Cabot saying Cleveland was not comfortable with Alex Van Pelt being the OC of a dual threat quarterback, well, if you draft Jayden Daniels, what are you getting? You're getting a dual threat quarterback. The number one thing about Daniels that sticks out right away is his athleticism. So do you have the right offensive coordinator to get the most out of Daniels? He's 23 years old. He's going to play on day one. So that's another question that I have, because if Alex Van Pelt is a guy that doesn't necessarily understand how to best utilize a dual threat quarterback, then are you going to be able to develop Daniels within this West Coast offense? Or is his development going to be stunted and you're not going to get as much from him as you would if you had another offensive coordinator? Cliff Kingsbury, for example, which is why many people are connecting Daniels to Washington. Kingsbury has the experience of working with Kyler Murray. So how would that hold Daniels back, and would it hold him back? So I do have some legitimate concerns about Jayden Daniels. He would be somewhat a risky pick. He would be a risky pick to me for all of the things I just mentioned. Would I pick him? I'll let you know in a minute. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Trying to hit 3,000 subscribers by midnight. That was our goal. Can we do it? I don't know. We need a big push. We're about 75 away. So don't forget to give us that thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe. And if you love the content I'm giving to you, check out the Patreon page as well. You can check it out in the description. Patreon.com/Nick Cattles. $5 a month, $1.25 a week. By the way, I'm gonna get back to Daniels in a minute. This weekend, I went to a establishment. I'm not gonna name the place. I went to a local establishment. Do you know how much money a beer cost me? I was shocked. Shocked. I had a couple of New England hazies, okay? A couple of IPAs. I got the bill. This is a place in Foxborough, okay? Not Gillette Stadium, not New York City, not Miami, not LA. It cost me like $13 a pint. $13 a pint. My head almost imploded. Now I'm not a cheap dude, but $13 for a pint, an IPA. I'm not going back to the place. It's a great place. Great place, nice, good beer. $13-14 for a pint? What did this IPA, birth little IPAs? Anyway, I was like, really? All right, so Jayden Daniels, would I pick him? I lean towards picking him, yes. Even though Ramsey asked what brewery. It wasn't a brewery. It was just a restaurant. A restaurant. $13-14 a pint. I would still lean towards drafting Daniels at 3. And I start with this idea of his big play capability. This is a guy who just gives you 20-plus yard plays. He gives you chunk plays, whether that's throwing the football, running with the football. He is a big play waiting to happen. And yes, I would be concerned about him not getting down, not getting out of bounds, all those things I talked about. But this dude is a human big play. He's Madden. He's one of those Madden-type crazy quarterbacks, okay? He has that ability. So, yes, there's some scary to him. Yes, I have legitimate concerns. But he's really good. And he's really athletic. And he can give you big play after big play. He is incredibly accurate downfield with the football. He's incredibly accurate outside of the numbers. And here's a great thing about Jayden Daniels. He might not do the best job of taking care of himself, but you know what he does take care of? The football. This is a guy who had only 7 turnover-worthy plays all of last season. He doesn't put the football in harm's way. When we think about Gerard Mayo mentioning decision-making, when talking about the quarterback and toughness and all of that, when you think about decision-making, Daniels does an incredible job of taking care of the football. He's not going to throw it to the other team. He's not going to throw it into a team meeting. Now, that might lead you to question why he didn't throw the football in the middle of the field, right? Because those throws are more risky a lot of the time because you're throwing some traffic. But he takes care of the football, man. He's a supreme athlete. You want to talk elite trait, athleticism, elite trait, accurate, down the field, accurate, outside the numbers, doesn't turn the football over, has arguably the cleanest mechanics in this draft, quick release, clean mechanics almost every time he throws the football, just natural motion, what you're looking for. So the mechanics are there. And I'm hoping that his body fills out. You know, he's 6'3.5". He's a tall guy. Can the nutrition program and Gerard Mayo's brother and the weight training program, can they put 5 to 10 pounds on that guy? I can guarantee you that's a conversation that has happened in that facility. If we draft Jayden Daniels, can we pack on 5 to 10 pounds? If we can get him up to 220 and then he's playing at 210 or so, you feel much better about it. I think he will be able to fill out. I think he'll be able to add at least 5 to 10 pounds. Kirk Cousins added weight throughout his career. You can do it. And it's the number 3 pick. What have I said from the beginning? With the number 3 pick, you got to swing big. Swing big on the talent. There's going to be concerns about all of these guys. And I'm hoping to get into some of the Drake May concerns. We've covered them a little bit, but I want to do a deeper dive on May at some point, hopefully this week. There's going to be risks with all of these guys. There's going to be questions about all of these guys. Every single one of them. There are going to be questions. There are even questions about Caleb Williams. And he has been seen as the surefire number 1 guy for a while. But when you have a top 3 pick, you swing on the talent. And you swing on the ceiling. And Jayden Daniels has one heck of a ceiling. All right, do the Patriots have a quarterback whisperer? Do they have a secret weapon? I'm going to get to that in a minute. First, we got a super chat after the huddle. If you want to jump in front of the line with your comment or your question, you can do that by sending a super chat after the huddle as a $5 super chat. Trivia question. Can you name the quarterback in the 2018 NFL draft who is the quarterback that has 2 championship rings, not Super Bowl rings? Oh, boy. No, I can't. Not off the top of my head. The 2018 NFL draft. 2 championship rings, not Super Bowl rings. Yeah, I don't know. I posed the question to everybody else out there. I appreciate the super chat after the huddle, but off the top of my head, when I'm in the middle of this, I can't come up with that. That's difficult. Not when I'm in the middle of a pod. But I appreciate the super chat. Maybe somebody can answer that question. Again, the trivia question. Quarterback of the 2018 NFL draft who has 2 championship rings, not Super Bowl rings. Throw it in the chat if you know the answer or if you want to give it a shot. All right. Do the Patriots have a quarterback whisperer? You know, I find it funny when people immediately when they hear Ben McAdoo. And if you want to check out a podcast that I did months ago when McAdoo was brought into New England, I said this on the podcast. He is going to be fodder for talk shows. He's going to be the punchline because everybody remembers the slick back, greasy here in New York. They all remember the gigantic menu, like, play call sheet that he had, even bigger than Andy Reid's. They're all going to remember how he melted down as the head coach in New York. I predicted all of this. And it's not because I'm some great soothsayer. It's because I've been in the media. I've hosted radio shows for more than 10 years. I've done it locally. I've done it nationally. I've done it on the East Coast. I've done it in the Mid-Atlantic. I've done it in California. I've done it across this country. I know how people think. And I knew as soon as McAdoo was hired that people were going to immediately jump in and crack all of the jokes. Oh, Ben McAdoo now in New England, huh? Did you see him in New York? How terrible of a head coach he was? But I would love for you to go back through this channel's history and check out the Ben McAdoo episode, because I spent time on looking at the man's track record. And you might be surprised of what I unearthed looking at the facts. So check that out. But I bring up McAdoo because during that podcast, we had a couple of anecdotes about McAdoo's ability to evaluate the quarterback position. There was an anecdote about Patrick Mahomes that McAdoo was standing on the table trying to get the Giants to trade up to draft Mahomes. He wanted Patrick Mahomes. He thought Mahomes was the guy. He also had Josh Allen rated very high during the aforementioned 2018 draft. Those were a couple of anecdotes. Well, we've got something else here. Andrew Cooper from Fantasy Alarm and Sirius XM Radio, he posted late last week, multiple sources have confirmed McAdoo had high grades on Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, and Lamar Jackson. He also advised Carolina to pass on Kenny Pickett, Desmond Ridder, and Malik Willis. So McAdoo had high grades on Mahomes, Allen, and Jackson. He told Carolina to pass on Pickett, Ridder, and Willis. This doesn't mean that Ben McAdoo is always right. It doesn't mean that he's flawless. But what it does mean is he has a documented record of grading quarterbacks and evaluating quarterbacks and getting a number of those grades and evaluations correct. When a lot of the football world felt differently, he stood by his eyes. And all I got to say is, having Ben McAdoo on this staff, I don't think it can hurt. I don't think it can hurt the Patriots having him on the staff. If you look at his past, if you look at how he's evaluated quarterbacks. And I think the Patriots have done a good job of collecting a lot of brain power to look at this quarterback position. I feel pretty good. I really do. I feel good about the Patriots. If they draft a guy at 3, I feel good about their process. I feel good about their evaluation. I think they have the right guys in the room to give them the best chance. Again, nothing is guaranteed. Nobody is flawless. But they have the guys. They have the eyes in that room that give the Patriots a chance to land a franchise quarterback at 3. You've got McAdoo's track record. You've got Van Pelt's experience in the relationships that he has cultivated with quarterbacks throughout the NFL. T.C. McCartney, a well-thought-of young offensive quarterback coach who people believe is just going to get better and better. Elliott Wolf and his experience with his father, Ron Wolf, evaluating quarterbacks, watching quarterback film. Ron Wolf is a big believer in you've got to find a special guy to be your quarterback. You can't just go out and just get anybody. Doesn't work that way. Ron Wolf believes in talent at that position. And Elliott obviously spent his entire life under his father's learning tree. And he spent more than a decade in that Green Bay front office watching how those guys evaluated quarterbacks. So did Alonzo Highsmith in his time in Green Bay, alongside Elliott Wolf and Ron Wolf. So when you look at the track record, of Green Bay, you look at the track record of Ben McAdoo, you look at Van Pelt, who has played the position at the NFL level, understands the mind of a quarterback better than anybody in the league, or at least as good as anybody in the league. The Patriots have positioned themselves with the people that they have brought in to make the right decision at 3. And if they don't draft a quarterback at 3 and they draft a quarterback later, all right, that's fine. If that's the decision they make. Yeah, I would swing at Drake May, but I feel I would take May and Daniels at 3. But I feel confident that this front office and this coaching staff, they have the right people in the right spots to make that decision. Don't forget to give us that thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe. I see people jumping into the chat, people joining the show. Give us that thumbs up. Let's beat that algorithm on YouTube. That means so much to a show like this as we try to build. And we're trying to hit 3,000 subscriptions by midnight tonight. We're about 75 away. If you're chilling here, click that subscribe button. Click that thumbs up button. Always appreciate it. Rate and review Spotify, Apple Pods. Nothing is guaranteed, but if you have the right kind of evaluator and you have the right philosophy heading into the draft, then you give yourself the best chance to draft the right guy at the most important position. That's how I feel. And I think the Patriots have done that. I mean, we'll see what they do. Daniels has concerns. Again, we'll get into some of Drake May's concerns at some point here, dive deeper into that. Try to do our best covering all of these quarterbacks as we get ready for that third pick, whether or not, if it's a quarterback. All right, want to wrap things up. Quick thoughts on the Red Sox. 7-3 on the West Coast. Pitching staff nails. 1.49 ERA. They're also second in the majors in strikeouts. So they have done a terrific job as a pitching staff so far. They're doing that whole backwards thing again, throwing more breaking balls and fastballs. I am concerned about arms and how that's going to, force some wear and tear on some of these guys. But the pitching staff has been great. The bats showed up yesterday in full force. Tyler O'Neill has been a fantastic pickup so far. He has 5 home runs. With all of that said, we are talking about the M's, the A's, and the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim. Not the greatest competition, but 7-3 on a West Coast trip to start the season is 7-3. The bad news over the weekend, Trevor Story goes to the IL. He has a dislocated shoulder. It doesn't sound too good. Alex Spear tweeted out Trevor Story and what he said. He said, is a significant injury, frustrating, not fun getting injured. I'm going to miss games. It's kind of a freak thing. I'm going to miss a little time for sure. So just brutal. Brutal for Trevor Story. Doesn't sound good. And you had Rafael Devers. His reaction on the field immediately didn't make you feel good at all. Kills the Red Sox defense up the middle. Their right-handed power was already an issue going into the season. Now O'Neill has helped that. But Bobby Dahlback is 0 for 9. I think you've got to sit him. And now you lose Story on the right side of the plate with his power, the stuff that he can bring. And if he is done, it's 145 games in 3 years. That contract will be looked at as one of the worst contracts in quite a while. Going to give you 48 games a year if he's out for the rest of the season. Just absolutely brutal. Orioles come to town. Opening day tomorrow at Fenway. That's a better litmus test than what we've seen. All right, let's jump in with a super chat. Ken Weber, $20 super chat. Man, Ken, thank you. I appreciate you. Your support of this program means the world to me. Just consistently sending super chats. I mean, I can't say enough when people spend their hard-earned money on sending super chats to me and signing up for the Patreon as we try to keep this thing trucking along and survive in a very tough market. Morning, Monday. I think Daniels will learn quickly to protect himself. All it will take is one game taking hits from NFL-level tackles, in my opinion. What scares me about him are his legs and ankles. Interesting. His legs and his ankles. It's the frame, right? Like, he's got a long torso. He's thin. I would hope, Ken, that you're right. I would hope that he learns to get down, to get out of bounds. But we've seen it before where quarterbacks, they just have an issue. Sometimes these guys that love to run with the football, they just have an issue with being able to consistently protect themselves. It's almost like they're just so in love with the idea of creating the big play, or they don't think that, the defense is going to be able to catch up to them because their athleticism. And maybe it will take, Ken, maybe it will take kind of a shock value thing where Daniels gets labeled by an NFL linebacker and then gets up and goes, oh, yeah, never again. Never again. If you told me that Daniels could take care of himself, I'd have less question. Again, I would take him at 3, but my concerns would be alleviated tremendously if I felt confident that he would be able to learn that and adapt his game to get down, to get out of bounds, and not take those hits. Do not take those hits. The legs and the ankles, interesting. It's, again, not the biggest guy in the world, runs an awful lot, and I think people have visions of RG3. You also have visions of Lamar Jackson, though. And when it goes right, it goes really, really, really well. And people will tell you, and I would agree with this, that Daniels is a better thrower of the football. He's a better passer from the pocket than Jackson was when Jackson got drafted out of Louisville. I watch a number of Jackson's games in Louisville, have a best friend down in Virginia Beach who was a Louisville fan. So I watched a lot of Lamar Jackson, Mekhi Becton over those couple of years. And I think there's really no denying that Daniels is a higher level passer than Jackson was coming out. Now, Jackson, he's somebody who he's been a little dinged up recently. So is he going to be able to stay at this level for 7, 8, 9, 10 years? I mean, I think that's the bigger thing as well. If you're drafting somebody at 3, okay, maybe he stays healthy for the first 2 or 3 years. Can he stay healthy for 6, 7, 8, 9, 10? You're drafting a guy at 3 because you think he is the answer at the most pivotal position on the field for the next 10 to 15 years. That's why you're drafting somebody. They've got that high ceiling, and they are the solution to the problem for the next decade and a half. Getting 3 or 4 years of high-level play is great, but not if it falls off a cliff by the time you get to year 5. All right, so that's a little bit of a deep dive. Jayden Daniels. We're going to continue our thoughts on the quarterbacks as we get closer to the draft. Don't forget to give us that thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe. Trying to hit 3,000 subscriptions. We've got just over 12 hours to get about 100 subscriptions or so. We got to try to pump that. Let's do it. Let's do it together. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Don't forget to rate and review on Spotify and Apple Pods. And if you want to check out the Patreon, be my guest. All the support that we need so we can continue to survive and give you the content, exclusive content over at the Patreon. Appreciate every single one of you. Until tomorrow, unless something big breaks, like Kyle Duggar yesterday. You can check out that pod as well on the channel. Until tomorrow at 11 a.m., this has been the Nick Cattle Show.